Well, I have a question for you. COVID-19 has impacted nations, organizations, churches, people globally. So what do you think about how is mobilization being impacted by this present crisis? And also, what do you have to say about what does the future of mobilization look like as we contemplate engaging the church in discovery, development, and deployment?
Well, I'm going to say something real quick about that. I really like the sentiment Mary just shared. The mission hasn't changed. And I would say the same thing is true. Mobilization and the need for mobilization hasn't changed either. The fundamentals are the same. What we need to do, though, is to pivot or to adjust in how we are mobilizing. How are we engaging? One of the things I was thinking about is I talk about the importance of realizing that we need to mobilize holistically. Many of us are more conditioned, better skilled in the discovery aspect of mobilization, or the development, or in sending, sometimes what we call the deployment phase. But I think that right now it is being made more apparent than ever that, first of all, none of us are experts at all of this: discovery, development, deployment. In all of this, I really feel that we're being driven deeper in our relationships. That if we're going to mobilize, that we're going to have to stop concentrating on what we can't do and start concentrating on what we can do, make the adjustments that are necessary, and build the relationships that are going to ensure that we're effectively mobilizing the church from awareness right on through to engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Randy, thank you very much for those comments. Listening to you and Mary and Mark just share a bit, and John, it's really interesting how our world has changed. And I think this is manifest to everyone. But something that strikes me particularly is how certain models that have been popular in the church, how they just collapsed overnight. I'll give you an example. The superstar preacher model. I mean, suddenly the superstar guy can't reach his congregation. You can't. The best you can do is, call them on the phone, send them, messages, do a virtual meeting, and stuff like that. And while it's important to keep connected in all of these ways, there are aspects of church and Christian life that virtual will never accomplish, which brings me to the need, what I believe as the main need at this hour is that we need to mobilize every believer to take their place as far as mobilizing and missions is concerned. So I believe that a major key to mobilizing will be equipping all of God's people, helping them to see their place in God's purpose. And here is something else I think is important. Obviously, the mission will not change. Our methods will have to change. All of us are agreed on that. But here is something else I think that might have to change. Our structures might have to change. The reason is because we might need to go from centralization to decentralization. We might need to go from foreign to local. Maybe we also need to go from hierarchical to flat. Organizations that have been hierarchical with all kinds of chains might need to flatten out so that people can do ministry at the edges. But I do believe that the more we are able to mobilize all of God's people, we can accomplish much. And I think that this is the hour just to do that.
One thing I would add, and thank you, Ferdinand, I think that just to add to what you said there and to underscore it, it seems to me that this is an opportunity. I think we're tempted to look at it as a hindrance, but I think it could be a release in many ways into a broader awakening in mobilization. I think as we look to influence networks and leaders, and maybe we'll do less with direct conversations with individuals and more broad sowing of the seed of mobilization into networks and with influencers. So it could be a shift that God would use to strengthen the mobilization that we see and desire globally. That the shift would go from less face-to-face mobilization and more mobilizing by prayer and online coaching and consulting. Shifting from direct conversations to writing and posting of ideas and the equipping that could happen more broadly. And shifting from working directly with candidates to working indirectly to do the equipping of leaders and influencers and networks, so that, just as Ferdinand said, it can be pushed to the grassroots, that mobilization might become more of a global movement. And also global learning, I think, will be opened up more pervasively so that we can share ideas back and forth throughout the global network.
I love what you shared. I am passionate actually about nimble structures and scalable structures because that's what we need. Even without this pandemic, the rate of change in this world is just phenomenal, and we can no longer depend on centralized hierarchical, high control structures. Our structures have to be nimble. They have to be scalable. They have to be empowering structures. And that's something I'm really passionate about.